me introduce myself. I am Dr. Irvin Wolf. Originally, I am from Győr, Hungary, which is near the Austrian border. I was an only child, had a wonderful childhood. When I graduated high school, I wanted to go to university and couldn't. Hungary had a law called numerus clausus that limited the number of Jews at university. So, instead I got a certificate as a dental technician. This way I could practice these close to my father's profession. He had an MD in dentistry. Because Hungary was an ally of Germany, I had to join a forced labor camp near my home for Jewish men ages 20 to 55. And then in March of 1944, Germany fully occupied Hungary and started deporting Jews to Auschwitz and other concentration camps. I got a 2-day furlough so I could visit my parents before they were shipped out. And my parents gave me a pendant that says, "From your parents with love, God should save you." That was the last gift I got from my parents. I was moved to another camp near the Russian border. That's where I learned the cruelty of the world for the first time. The guards would make us dig ditches. When we were down in the hole, they'd pee on our heads. Well, I escaped from there with a friend of mine. We ran across another group of laborers from another camp, but they paid their guards to treat them decently. We stayed in them for a little while, but we only stayed about a month because we weren't on their roster. So we moved down to Budapest. There we found a Catholic old ladies' home that hid us. They used to hide us under their beds. Later, I walked on to Debrecen, which had already been liberated by the Russians. After the war ended, I went back to Budapest and I lived with my aunt and uncle who had survived the Holocaust. But I needed to know about my parents. So I traveled back to Hungary, or to Győr, traveling on top of the trains. When I got to our apartment, I found it occupied by strangers. But by police order, they had to let me in and let me have a room to stay in. I never did get the apartment back. As survivors of Auschwitz trickled back, I learned the fate of my parents. Look at my grave marker. Those are the names of my mama and papa. You see, they don't have proper graves. They were gassed at Auschwitz. I always have them here with me in my heart. Anyway, when I got back to Budapest, I saw a sign at the medical university that said, through the help of the American Joint Action Committee, people who had lost their parents in the Holocaust could get medical educations. So I applied, and I was one of 8 lucky students to be admitted in 1945. That's where I met my dear sweet Judith. She was visiting a friend of hers who I was tending at the hospital. She was only 14. My roommate was giving her Hebrew lessons. One day he forgot and wasn't there when she showed up. All she found was me. Lucky, lucky me. When she was 17, a friend arranged for us to go on a double date. By the time she graduated high school, I was practicing as an obstetrician gynecologist at the hospital. We got married January 15th, 1953. First we had a civil ceremony to satisfy the law. Then we had a religious ceremony to satisfy God, the higher law. Her grandfather performed the ceremony at her uncle's house. We were surrounded by friends and families, but had to keep the windows shuttered so no one outside could see what was going on. Communism frowns very heavily on religious ceremonies. The next night, her uncle was arrested and tortured by the Russians because he was working with the Joint Action Committee and the Russians thought he was a spy. About this time, Stalin got in his thick head that Jewish doctors were killing Soviet leaders, so he started imprisoning Jewish doctors. But God rescued these doctors. 3 months later, he gave Stalin a stroke and there were no doctors to take care of him because they're all in jail. During the revolution, the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, my wife and I escaped. We didn't know what would happen, but knew God would be on our side, be with us. And on the train, we met a priest who knew a guy who smuggled people across the border into Austria. The priest told him we were classmates of his, so he treated us like friends. I think God forgave him that little lie. Across the border, we were met by Austrian guards. They were border guards, and we gave them rum and asked them for money so we can get bus tickets to Vienna. While they were drinking the rum, we found out that they were SS guards during the war. Even so, being honest people, we returned the money to them when we got through Vienna. With the help of the Joint Action Committee, we boarded a U.S. Army transport on Christmas Eve. We were met by the band playing both the Hungarian and the American national anthems. First we lived with my wife's father and stepmother in Providence, Rhode Island, but then moved to Boston. We learned English and I studied for my medical exams while working as researchers at Harvard University. After I got my medical certificate, we moved to Detroit and lived on Jefferson near Evangelical Deaconess Hospital where I worked. My wife worked at Children's Hospital, and that's where she was when she found out she was pregnant with our son, who later gave us 2 grandchildren. We moved to Roseville, where I had an OB/GYN practice, and I worked out of St. Joe's for 25 years delivering many, many babies. We went back to Hungary 3 times to visit friends and relatives and to get our fill of good Hungarian food, but I never could get myself to visit Auschwitz. My wife and I decided, after what we had been through, no one's going to tell us where we could and couldn't go. So we traveled around the world visiting hospitals and other medical professionals to learn more about the business. But we learned the best place to be is right here. Not necessarily the cemetery, in the USA. God has blessed us, and may He bless all of you. Thank you for visiting us today in the cemetery. Shalom.
Shalom.